Happy Tuesday, New Haven. Welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Well, we have a hometown young woman made good with us today. Jazmine Hughes is a reporter and an editor at the New York Times and has just won an Ellie, a prestigious American Society of Magazine Editors Award for deeply observed portraits of major culture figures that reveal their subjects with insight and humor, which is very accurate of the way Jazmine Hughes writes. Jazmine Hughes, welcome to Dateline New Haven, and thanks for making time for your hometown.
Oh my gosh, thank you for reaching out to me. This is up there with the Ellie. I think that they are easy for me as a proud New Haven native. Thank you.
Well, I've been following your career for years, and I was thinking, boy, I really do love your writing a lot. I'll just throw that on the
Thank you so
table.
much. That's so kind.
And I want to talk today about the award. I want to talk about your path to becoming a successful writer in New York and nationally, and how you approach profile writing, because I find that very interesting. Yeah. But first, I want to ask you about Evan Gershkovich. He's the Wall Street Journal reporter who's 31 years old, I guess, same age as you, who's been kidnapped and actually, arrested in Russia on trumped-up charges as part of our ongoing battles with the U.S. and Russia over the Ukrainian war. And I guess from your social media feed, it turns out you're friendly with Evan. So I'm just asking how you're doing and how this affected you.
Hi, yes. Thank you so much for asking about Evan, who I have known for many years as Gersh. And I wrote to him the other day, and I was like, the craziest thing of all is that everyone's calling you Evan. And I keep saying, who's that? Evan and I met when we were young kids starting out at the Times. We were like 23, 24. And I was scrolling back through some of our old messages, and we talked so much about like how much we loved journalism, and how Evan, because he is of Russian descent, his parents had emigrated over from Russia, from the Soviet Union rather, in the 70s. Just how being a correspondent in a place like Moscow was like beyond his wildest dreams. So when he got this job, we were so thrilled for him. And so I think it makes it especially heartbreaking to see all of this. I mean, there's really nothing worse than your friend being detained in a Russian prison. But the fact that this is like his lifelong dream to do this sort of work and he's being punished subsequently is pretty hard. But recent reports are saying that he is in good spirits as far as one could be. And he's eating and he's wearing his normal clothes and he's cracking jokes. So it's the best that we can hope for right now.
Jazmine, you said you knew him when you were starting out. Was he at the Times as well?
Yes. Evan started at the New York Times as a news assistant, I want to say in 2015, 2016.
And what were you doing at the time there?
I was an assistant editor, just like it was my first job, so my very low ranking editor status.
And did you guys, was there a group that hung out? Were there a group of age peer starting out journalists that decided to work in the office, get to know each other, go out for drinks or dinner, do stuff on the weekends, or support each other in specific ways?
Absolutely. I mean, what was special about Evan is that I think that he had so many of these connections and relationships across the newsroom. I saw him in the office, but it came to pass that we lived like 4 blocks away from each other. And he lived, and I think I must have lived with myself, and he lived in an apartment with like 3 other guys about his age. So like, when I think of Gersh, I think of our times in the office and the New York Times cafeteria and reading stories and emailing back and forth about our favorites. But I also think of like beer pong and going to bars in our neighborhood, and Evan making like midnight eggs for everybody when we got back from the club. Like we had a lot of really good times, and I really hope that he comes back home safely and soon.
That is a good cafeteria, by the way. I was there once. I was thinking, man, you guys eat well over there. It's nice and bright.
It's not bad.
And so where was the neighborhood you guys lived, and what bars would you hit?
I live in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and Evan lived, I guess, in technically Prospect Heights, closer to Washington Avenue. So there's a dancey bar called Friends and Lovers that I remember us spending way too much time at. A bar on Washington that's changed names a bunch of times. But mostly there's a a pretty big and well-known plant shop across the street from his old apartment called Natty Garden. And I think we'd spent a lot of time there. This is a period in every millennial's life when we like had sort of started to realize that it might not be possible for us to like own property and have children like our parents did, at least financially comfortably so. And so everyone got really into plants. So I
Really?
remember bringing him and his roommates, a bunch of like 25-year-old dudes over to the plant shop and being like, all right, let us find some things that are going to just make your apartment look a little more adult, a little more cool together. And obviously the plant died within like a month.
Oh, his plant or your plant?
His plant.
Now, was it a Caribbean theme, Natty plant?
Natty Garden, yes, it's a Jamaican owned and operated plant store.
So I guess if we're opening now, there might be more diversified supply of plants given the legal changes in. So we're talking to Jazmine Hughes, who grew up in New York, and she's just like hitting out of the park in New York as a story editor and writer at the New York Times Magazine. Just won an Ellie Profiling Award here on Dateline New Haven. But first, we're talking about a friend of hers she came up in the business with, who's now in the headlines, and our hearts are definitely going out to him and his family and his friends as he's stuck in a prison in Russia, as he was reporting there for the Wall Street Journal. So then your paths didn't diverge, but yet sort of parallel climbs. He left the Times. He eventually went to Moscow News, Wall Street Journal, became a successful international correspondent. You became the successful story editor and writer in New York. You stayed in touch, I take it, regularly?
Yes. I mean, not incredibly regularly. Last time I saw Evan, I had run into him in Penn Station, of all places. He came back to the States to get his COVID vaccine.
Really? He didn't want those Russian vaccines. They weren't very good.
I think he wanted as many vaccines as possible. But he came back to the States to get his COVID vax. I think he'd only come back maybe once a year since he had left, and that was in 2017. We mostly just kept up with each other on social media. And like I said, I was scrolling through some of our messages, and my last few messages for him was him saying like, look, we really did it. Like all the dreams we cast when we were 24, 25 years old, we've achieved them. So I'm very, very proud of him. And I'll say, considering what week it is in the Jewish faith, and Evan is a man of Jewish faith as well, I think I've heard of a lot of people setting an extra place setting for him at their Passover Seders.
I'm going to do that too then. Good idea.
I imagine I will also do it as well.
So when was that message that you guys sent that we finally did it?
When he got the Wall Street Journal job, so about a little less than a year ago.
A little less than a year ago. So how's it impact a reporter when it's someone that close to you with that same part of life? I noticed there's a lot going on social media, and often it's hard to know how much social media activity reflects what's going on outside of social media. Are you and other people who are friends in that circle in regular contact? Are you doing anything to help each other? Or I don't know if there is a way to help Evan except keep it in the news. Are you feeling anything specific that you're sharing with each other about how this impacts you as you go about your day-to-day job? I mean, you just won this big award at the same time as your friend got taken prisoner.
And I'll tell you, it's the craziest thing. I woke up the day after the awards, hungover with a box of Dominoes next to me, to a news alert with my friend.
You came from New Haven, Jazmine. You had Dominoes.
Listen, I know it was a really, really low point for me. I admit it. I'll be the first to say. But I saw the news alert and I was like, oh, that's so funny. Someone with Gersh's name has been arrested in Russia. And then I opened my phone and I had like 10 texts from friends being like, is that your friend? So it feels like totally bizarre and bananas to have that and the Ellie have happened in the same 12 hours. I've reached out to his roommate from Yore when Evan and I spent a lot of time together. So I've been in touch with him, and I connected the roommate to Evan's parents because some of the Wall Street Journal people had been confabbing with the Times people. There are a lot of, I think, varied groups. He's got like, New York or American journalist friends. He's got so many friends in Russia. He's gotten like college friends. He's from Princeton, New Jersey. So he has friends from people in Princeton. So there are all these disparate groups. But the way in which we've all come together is that I think his friends in Russia have set out an email address, which I can find the address for right now. And they're encouraging people to send Evan letters and notes. Now, because he's being held in a Russian state prison, all of those letters have to be translated into Russian. But they have found someone to do that translation work. So anyone is encouraged to reach out to him at Free Gershkovitz. Last name is Gershko, V as in Victor, ICH, Free Gershkovitz at gmail.com.
And how do they get those? I guess you have to use Google. That'd be kind of funny for him. Google Translate.
God, I know. So we have found, I believe, a fact checker, someone like loosely affiliated, or I'm sorry, affiliated with the journalism industry who is fluent in Russian and who's going to do all the translation work. And they're delivering, notes from friends, from admirers, from just everyday people. Anyone is encouraged to reach out to him because he's unfortunately probably doesn't have a lot of other stuff to do.
And without belaboring the point, it's been a few days. I'm guessing it felt like weeks, given the intensity of the days where you won this big award. That's sort of a high point in your career. He was at a high point in career, your friend, who you were a colleague with, who's now imprisoned. How has that been emotionally for you? Have you been able to savor this award beyond the Domino's pizza? Have you been able to, are you like immersed? You don't seem like all draggy about the Evan thing, although I'm sure it's very upsetting. What's it been like for you just personally to reach this point in your career at the same time as your friend reached that point?
It makes me feel old. Isn't that insane? I can't believe that
You're not old, by the way.
I know. That's the craziest part. It makes me feel something that I'm not. No, it makes me feel, first and foremost, like terrified for my friend. Like I think that news came out last Wednesday and I couldn't leave my apartment. I was just like refreshing constantly and looking his name. And then, trying to stop myself from going down the rabbit hole of what had happened to people such as Brittany Griner or other people who had been taken into these prisons. And I felt really, really freaked out and really scared and sort of insane that like my sweet dear friend Gersh, who I've like played beer pong with dozens of times, could be in this predicament. As time has gone on, I think the best thing for me has been to continue to reaching out to his friends. This man called Joshua Yaffa wrote a beautiful essay on Evan in the New Yorker, published at the end of last week, which I read and I cried and I sent him a note. I've been talking to his old roommates, like I said. I've been in touch with Margaret Sullivan, one of his old bosses at the Times. It's been helpful to talk about him, just to both like keep his name in the media, but also at the forefront of my mind, because at the end of the day, beyond being my friend, he's just a journalist who was assigned to do his job. And if this sort of thing can happen to him, it can happen to so many other people. And in order for us to lessen, I think, the possibility of that occurring, we have to like keep this at the forefront of our minds and work to make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else.
Jazmine Hughes, editor and writer at the New York Times Magazine, product of New Haven. So tell me a little bit about winning the Ellie. How big a deal is that to you that, you worked so hard at your magazine writing, you've worked so hard at building a career in journalism. Was this a big deal to you? Is that why you had the Domino's and woke up hungover?
Not the Domino's because
I'm going to leave. I'm going to stop ribbing you about that because I think Domino's is fine. That's very snotty of me.
No, it's actually, Paul, the thing is Domino's is not fine. And I should have known that.
Domino's
it was
is
just
fine.
The only thing open at 1 a.m. When I got nominated for the award, I was like, oh, this is it. This is the equivalent of winning, because I have worked at the New York Times since I was 28 years. It'll be my 8-year anniversary next week, I mean. And, so to have come in as sort of like a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, mildly idiotic 23-year-old, and I'd gotten to the point where my boss and my editor, the same people who hired me, believed in me and my talent and my skill enough to even nominate me for this award. These are the people who've really seen me grow most in my professional life. That was a gift unto itself. And I felt incredibly grateful, and I felt like seen and validated by the people who knew me best. And I was like, I don't even need to win this award. But then when I won the award, I was like, I love winning
How'd you
this
celebrate
award.
it? How'd you celebrate it?
How did I celebrate it? I'm still celebrating. I don't know. I ordered the Domino's. I got flowers from a bunch of people. That was all very nice. But what I'll say about the award is that we all have that sort of like scary lizard monster in the back of our heads in various sizes, just, whispering to us, being like, you're not that great, you're not all you're cracked up to be, or everyone's lying to
Mm,
you, or like you're embroiled in a huge
mm.
conspiracy where everyone's pretending that you're a good writer.
I've heard
And
about
now
that
I look at,
conspiracy. Yeah.
yes, yes. And so now I feel as if there are all these times in which I've convinced myself that I've gotten everything in my life through charm, which I've gotten quite a bit through charm, which is a skill in and of itself. But I think looking at the award, which I'm doing right now, I didn't know any of these people who elected that I get it, or I don't know anyone on the committee. And so I really do feel like I don't know, my bearings, my charm, my charisma, my social media appearance, like all the sort of trimmings that like follow me into the office, or like when you meet me in person, I think, um weren't on the table. It was just my work. And so I
Correct.
feel like it's sort of, for the first time, it feels pretty unquestionable.
Hmm.
And
It's a validation.
it's very validating, and I'm trying to hold on to that.
So you grew up in New Haven. Did you? You had five.
New Haven, yes, I did.
And were you thinking of being a journalist when you growing up, a writer? What was on the mind?
I wanted to I think I wanted to be a lawyer, basically up until like first week of freshman year of college. And then I was like,
Oh,
ooh, it seems like
you went
a
to
lot of
Hill
work.
House, right?
I went to Hill House, I went to ECA, and I
Yeah, my
also had gone
daughters went to
to
ECA. I
Haven
wonder if
High.
you overlapped. Did you know any
Oh,
Bass? Did you
really?
know any Bass kids in
I
ECA?
I
Sarah
don't
or
think
Annie?
so. Sarah actually does sound familiar. I graduated from ECA in 2008.
That's when my
So
daughter Annie
maybe. Yeah.
graduated. She was in your class at ECA. Were
Yeah.
you
Was
in
she in
writing?
music? No, I was in dance.
Oh,
Isn't that
they were in
crazy?
writing. Yeah, they have a great. I love ECA. I
I
felt like
love
that's like a
ECA, and I
refuge
thought
for
the
smart
writers were
kids.
so cool. Actually, it's funny. When I was at ECA, I auditioned for dance. I thought about writing, but I was like, now. And the writers were like so cool and poised, and like when we had our final events, like the dancers would put on a performance, the musicians would play a concert, but the writers would just come and do these like I mean, these readings, obviously, and I thought they were it was like seeing beatniks for the first time. I was like, damn,
They
yeah,
wanted to
cool,
think
cool,
they're beatniks.
cool.
Not my daughter. So. But Jess, so you went to Connecticut College, and what flipped the switch? How'd you go from lawyer to wanting to be a reporter?
I went to the first student newspaper meeting, and I thought that the editor in chief of the paper was very cute, like a man. Which, I gave up years later. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to join this. It was between that and Habitat for Humanity, because the meetings were at the same time, but the
Oh,
editor in chief of the paper was cute. And I was like, cool. And then, I worked on my college paper at Connecticut College my entire 4 years. And I think one winter break, either between freshman and sophomore year, I interned at the New Haven Register. I emailed them and I was sort of like, hey guys, you need any help? I've been, like I remember being at Hill House in the cafeteria and like reading the paper every morning with my free lunch. Like the New Haven Register had always been such a long part of my life. And so I interned there under Helen McDonald, who was very, very wonderful to me. And but yeah, the New Haven Register is actually probably the first like regional non-college newspaper I'd ever worked on. And once I did that, I was sort of like, this is fun. And had just been trucking ahead ever since.
and you had four sisters. But I read this excellent piece you wrote years back about being one of five sisters. And you said sister math means 6 = 5. You talk about how you have five siblings because you feel so much a part of one entity.
Yeah.
Did your sisters have similar career trajectories? How are they doing?
No, my sisters are, Paul, I gotta tell you, you got the worst Hughes on the phone with you today. My sisters are all far cooler, more successful than I am. Two of them still live in Connecticut, one in Bridgeport, one in Hampton. The older one is a teacher, an ESL teacher, and I should know the name of the school that she works at, but I don't. I'm sorry. And then my younger sister is like a page and layout editor for Hearst Media, so she does a lot of the front pages of the local papers. And then two of my other sisters live together in Los Angeles, and they're trying to make it big. And honestly, I think they will.
So that's an ambitious group. Sounds like a talented group and very word oriented group of
Yeah.
sisters. Were your parents in education or writing or?
Growing up, my dad was a broadcast producer for ABC News in the city. So I
Oh,
spent a lot of time at Union Station going to pick him up. And my mother is now a chiropractor's assistant, but she was working in the nursing industry when I was coming up.
Jazmine Hughes, New York Times. So you got your break getting to the Times after working a bunch of places like Hairpin and New Yorker you wrote for. How did you get into the editing slot at a young age at the magazine?
Dumb luck, I think, honestly. I got my job. Let's start back. I got my job at the Times because the New York Times Magazine was trying to have a sort of like web component in the way that, the New
Oh,
Yorker.com has like a really healthy web output that doesn't appear in the magazine. Same with New York Magazine. And so when the Times Magazine was trying to do that, I was brought in as a web editor. And that experiment or that effort, I would say, only lasted about a year or two. And then they just decided to like fold that web stuff into the print magazine. Unlike the New Yorker or New York Magazine, the New York Times Magazine like lives in a newspaper, and so there are lots of other places. There are lots of desks around the newspaper to do this sort of online only content. So once I got folded into the print magazine at the Times, this is probably like 2016, 2017, I started like editing columns and things. And it was,
do you do Judge Hodgman's column?
I did do Judge Hodgman's
I
column a
love
few
that one. That is
times,
the
indeed.
best. That is always a
It's so
five
funny.
sentence riot every week.
I'll have to tell my friend who did the majority of the
Yeah.
editing. I did Hodgman's column. I did the interview column in the back of the book. I edited some front of the book things. And the difference between my editing at the Hairpin, which I was editing all the personal essays, and editing at the Times is that people edit your edits. And so I've really felt as if, and I continue to feel as if, like in my editing, I think I was an editor at the Times for 5-6 years, and it was really trained. Like it's sort of like it's paid grad school in a way, or like a fellowship, or I always liken it to like playing for the Yankees. Like getting to come up and learn as an editor of the New York Times is such a solid foundation, and I could not be more grateful for.
I wasn't clear looking up. I know that you're still writing, obviously these long form profiles in the Times Magazine. You're also doing Metro reporting, right? Or is that still not happening?
No, I have to update my bio. I am now just a staff writer for the magazine.
Oh,
I
excellent.
spent 2 years prior being a staff writer for the magazine and a reporter on the Metro desk.
Because I noticed you got to do that memorable story of how Eric Adams spends his nightlife. And I was just imagining what that must have been like for you. Because he hangs out with these like somewhat shady, like Lubavitch or, Orthodox Jewish business people and stuff. But he goes to these clubs and he's out pretty late, which is fun. I'm wondering what that's like to report that as a young woman who he knows that it's not going to be good press for him, but he has a little bit of a Jimmy Walker in him where he wants to be kind of like, I'm the fun guy because we have a fun city. What was it like for you to trail him at night into these Casablanca, like the Casablanca, like enclaves of New York?
Oh God, it was awful. I mean, it was a tough time for me because funnily enough, I was also working on the Whoopi Goldberg profile. So I was just like very, very overdrawn. But what we would do is myself, Sarah Mazanier, my co-writer on the story, and three stringers, we would be like we had this huge calendar with like 5 restaurants because we couldn't get the mayor's schedule. So we like narrowed down his 5 favorite places in the city, and we would send someone to just like post up outside of them from the hours of like 9 to midnight or whatever. And we'd be in this massive group text. And so the first person to spot him would be like, okay, he's leaving in this car. This is the license plate.
Oh my goodness.
This is the direction they were headed when I lost them, or whatever. We were trailing them. I would like dress. We had reached out to the mayor, and I think that he had pushed back on, or rather he tried to delay us like going out an official night with him. So am I trailing him? I like tried to dress like a teen, like I tried not to bring any attention to myself. I was just like a regular young person who's standing outside this restaurant for 3 hours, just like not in a weird way, taking notes, So it was a lot of like being in like.
What did he say when he'd see you watching him going in and out? So he never was
he didn't see us, no.
Oh, you were never at the next table listening. Yeah.
There were a couple of times I was at the next table, but I'd bring a friend, and I was just a young woman out at a restaurant taking some notes under the table.
So you'd watch him.
He didn't know that we were trailing him, I think, until the very end.
And then how did he react? Did he say anything to you? Like, what are you doing? Why don't you leave me alone?
He said some things that I don't think were factually accurate.
Ooh, like what?
He said, I think our reporting, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but we reported that he went to this restaurant called Osteria La Baya in Midtown Manhattan that is owned by these two brothers you were just referencing. That in the course of a month, he went there, let's say 20 times over 31 days or something. And Eric Adams's response was, and I'm totally just what's the word? I'm just summing it up first, was like, oh, well, they only saw me at Osteria La Baya because they were only outside of Osteria La Baya. I go to mad other restaurants. And
Oh, so you thought you were giving him enough credit for not? Now, it's so interesting to me, Jazmine, that he allowed Maureen Dowd to follow him around for a very different kind of story, where she's sort of doing the cultural look, and obviously he must have known from the outset that it'd be a narrative arc that made him out to be heroic for having sort of a kind of character out on the town, showing that New York's great, and she kind of has always celebrated that kind of lifestyle. Whereas you guys were looking at like, what are the connections these brothers? Do they get city business? Is he getting favors from giving favors?
Does he pay? Has he paid for a single meal? He would show up to this restaurant again, basically 3-4 nights a week with an entourage of maybe 12 to 15 people. And we were just like, who's paying for this? Anyway, it was a really, really fun. If you're going to be a Metro reporter, I got to cover, blessedly, the New York City mayoral race. And then once we got a mayor, I got to trail him around the city. I feel pretty good. In the movie of my life, that'll be the action scene. And then I'll go back to...
And it's fair to say you've really made your reputation of these longer profiles of prominent people in culture, right? You mentioned Whoopi Goldberg, Kalila, Charlemagne the God, Viola Davis, Questlove, and my favorite piece of them all, Lil Nas X. I just thought that was a really special piece. But how did you become the person who kind of mastered these in-depth cultural profiles that really capture the person? You hung out with them, you capture what's fun of them, you have lively scenes, but you also connect with them and tell us why they matter. How did that happen?
I think there are 3 steps to that. One, I love profiles. I've always wanted to write like magazine celebrity profiles. And so as I mentioned, when Evan and I would talk about our hopes and dreams, like he wanted to go to Moscow and I wanted to be like a magazine writer. And so this is something that I have been trying to do since I was in college. Easily, I wrote a fake profile on my college roommate just to see if I could do it, and it was great. 2, I have a phenomenal editor. It's also my close friend, this woman called Claire Gutierrez, we've worked together for a long time. And I'll tell you, Paul, when I wrote my Whoopi Goldberg story, I had to get my wisdom teeth out halfway through. So I was on some pretty powerful painkillers, and I wrote a draft that, I swear to you, I had this idea about Whoopi Goldberg and Frederick Douglass and the ways in which they were similar. And Claire was like, what's this? You should just take the rest of the day off, and I'm just going to take this out. And then lastly, I'm a psychopath. I mean, the thing about loving profiles is that you go and you read the archival works in like Vanity Fair, the New Yorker, the New York Times, and the writer is like, I had 6 months with this person, and I foam at the mouth. Nowadays, you get a day if you're lucky. I think with Lil Nas X, I got, over the course of 2 or 3 days, I got like 3 hours with him. You don't get a lot of time with these people. So you have to, A, do a ton of research, but B, just like ask the weird, awkward questions, just like directly, because you don't have that much time. In an ideal situation, you would spend some time with the person and build up some trust. And I do try to do that over a short periods of time together. But for someone like Lil Nas X, I just had to be like, I don't know what the direct question
I guess so. I was wrong because I thought you must have spent weeks with him because you had this connection with him. You were driving in the car with him, going to get the pastrami sandwich. And what I think I got from it, because what I was looking for in that story, was to understand his sort of knowing humor. I felt like he was this guy when he blew up, because you did him when he blew up, like about 2 summers ago, right? And there was something about the way he was sort of winking at us, whether it was questioning gender norms, blending the country and smiling, with Billy Cyrus as he knows what people face if you're black and a country singer. But he was going ahead. He knew how to use social media to get attention when he'd call questions on things, but have fun while he's doing it. And it seemed to be this mix of sort of intelligence, canniness, and talent and fun. And I felt like, maybe you don't agree with that, I felt like when you were in the car with him and he was reacting to you, I felt like that came out. But what was going through your mind? Did you not have that sense of him the way I did? Like, what did you
Oh
come
no,
away
I
with?
thought when I had been interested in him. I pitched the story about him after his music video for Montero, Call Me by Your Name, came out, the famous
Right.
one where he
Yeah.
grinds on the devil. So I was interested in him as another Black person who grew up with like roots in the South, even though I'm from New Haven, and roots in the church and also is queer. And then I met him and I was like, oh my God, this is the most charming person in the entire world. Like I felt like I was blushing. I was like, oh my, you're so cool. It was funny. I think that he and I got along because he is part of the reason why he's so brilliant is that he's just spent a lot of time on the internet and he knows how things move. He knows what people want to see. He knows how to make things stand out. And so I think we have the same or very similar twisted sense of humor that comes with being on the internet every freaking day. But also I think what I found really like gratifying and silly about that entire thing is that he thought I was old. He sort of just like treated me like an older fuddy duddy, and I was like, I'm 29. I'm 29 years old, sir. Like this is
Yeah,
don't
but
tell
he
me
was
I'm
like
aging
22, wasn't
gracefully.
he?
He was 22, and he told me I
Yeah.
was aging gracefully, and I was like, one day you're gonna turn 29. I'm gonna remind you of this.
How
So
do
that
you
was a fun, humbling moment for me.
when you do this research, you hang out with them, how do you get that connection, especially if it's a little bit time limited? These people are very sophisticated about image. They have handlers. They
Mm-hmm.
vetted you probably. How do you get them to open up? How do you connect? Whether it's Whoopi Goldberg, Questlove, do you have any? I don't mean tricks, because you have a
Mm-hmm.
Janet Malcolm style, which is sort of treat him, get him to trust you, and then like get the dagger. You don't do that. How do you do it?
How do I deal with it? I mean, I have a little dagger. I would love to have a Janet Malcolm size dagger, but I think I have like a little butter knife that I like to turn at times. I think that I'll say two things. One, I've been lucky enough to interview people who more or less want to be interviewed or
Uh-huh.
understand the name of the game. There are some people, there are plenty of subjects that I've seen my colleagues cover who just do not want to open up. And that seems really difficult. And so I blessedly haven't been in that situation. I don't totally know what I would do if I were. But I have found that more than wanting to be known, people don't want to be misunderstood. And so I try to, by means of getting them to open up or loosen up, I first say, like, hey, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about yourself. Like, we know what this is. But before we start, do you want to ask me any questions about me? It's only fair. Some people take me up on it. Lil Nas X, for example, asked me if my glasses were real. And then he tried them on. He's like, oh my God, you can't see. And I was like, I know. And so that sort of broke the ice and then it got us in a good place. Some people like Kalela, I asked her if she had any questions for me and she was like, no. And then we ended up like getting a glass of wine and talking for 3 hours. So clearly that sort of thing wasn't needed. But in general, I'll say something like, if I'm trying to get someone to open up, it's easy with Twitter or social media. I can say, people have said X, Y, and Z about you. How would you respond to that? And usually people feel so compelled to correct the record. And that is a good opening way.
So you're talking about icebreakers.
Yeah.
I'm also heard you
Mhm.
speak about being heard and being understood. And you often hear about that in
Mhm.
relationships too, whether not just romantic but professional, or just that people want to know that even if that you don't agree with them, they just want to know that you heard what they had to say and they understood and they counted. Is that part of what you're
Exactly.
talking about? Do you say back to them to make it clear that you really do know what they want to say and that you heard them right?
Well, yes and no. So I will float like a hypothesis. Like I'm trying to, so Charlemagne the God, I did an interview with him years ago that was very, very short. And at the time, and actually still to this day, Charlemagne had a less than stellar reputation with Black women, specifically just for comments he had made. And, he had this whole laundry list of things. And so I didn't want to say, like, Charlemagne, do you hate Black women? Because it's a hard question. Like the
That's
only
the
answer
Deborah
is
Salomon
no.
question. Yeah.
And also that's a yes or no question. It doesn't
Right.
actually open up any opportunity to have a conversation. So I told him instead, like, yo, when I told my friends I was interviewing you, some of them got mad at me and they were like, he hates Black women, da 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 da. Like, why do you think my friends were saying this to me? Like, what have you said? Because like, I could do the research. I've already looked this up, but I want to know what he thinks is the reason that people have this idea. And how would you respond to that? And so a question like that, which is not like, not trying to do the work of like the publicity work of being like, people say you hate Black women, that must be really hard for you. Like, no, you can say it's hard for you, but I don't have to put words into your mouth. And then luckily with a place like the New York Times, our fact checking process is so rigorous and thorough that we don't do the thing where we like call the subject and read quotes back, but I don't think a subject has ever been surprised by what comes in a story, mostly because the fact checker has to make sure that it's correct before it can go out.
Jazmine, I think I heard you say that sometimes when you pitch a story in a profile, you want to find out something. Like with Lil Nas X, you're trying to find out what was behind and the approach and the thinking when he put out that provocative video and how to use social media. How do you avoid being a fangirl? So, like, if you're Whoopi Goldberg, I could be wrong, Lil Nas X. Like, Lil Nas X, I think what I heard there, because Charlamagne again, that's a tough question you have to ask him. With Lil Nas X, it's almost sort of like you wanted to find out the answer to the why, which is why I like that piece so much. Is there ever a danger when you with Questlove or Whoopi Goldberg that you're got to put your professional hat on, not try to prove that you're tough, that you're going to be mean, but like how do you step back and say I want to make this journalism as opposed to Teen Mag?
Every time. I mean, I went all the way to Cape Town, South Africa, and then I interviewed Viola Davis, and it was in my head, and then suddenly I was with Viola Davis, and I was like, oh my God. Luckily, I give myself like 15 minutes, and usually within 15 minutes, the sort of the star shock wears off. Sometimes it's earlier than that because celebrities, as they say, are often shorter than we expect. And I'm like, oh, we're the same height. You can't possibly be scary. And also, I think the writing process can be so tedious that even if I go into it being like, I love this person, by draft 4, I'm like, they're ruining my life. But again, this is why it's useful to have an editor, and this is why I feel so lucky to have a community of other writers and friends to read my stories and offer feedback and stuff. I say that when I write a profile of someone, I'm not trying to find out something new about my subject because like they're probably not going to share that with me. Why would they? But I want to find out why everybody loves them. Like, why are they in that wanted position? What do you do for people? What experience are people having when they interact with your art, your material? And so if I go into it with that, like I love Whoopi Goldberg. I have known about Whoopi Goldberg what seems like since the day I was born. And so when I met her, I was like, but then I realized, this isn't so much a story about Whoopi Goldberg, but about what Whoopi Goldberg means. And so obviously I'm going to sit and talk to her about all of this, but like the reporting for a person like Whoopi, for example, because she's such a great talker, was easy. I just turned on my microphone and Whoopi started talking and I was like, this is amazing. But the real sort of like work, intention, and skill on my end came with like being able to place her in a context of art, a context of popular culture, a context of like intellectual discourse, a context of like the expectations of Black women and movie stars and all that stuff, because she's had such a long and capacious career. So, long story short, I do get a little nervous, but most of the time I'm just like, I gotta do my job, I guess, because it is a job.
Do you have advice for people in New Haven, up and comers, how you succeeded? Would you tell them? Do you come back to New Haven, by the way?
I came back to New Haven for the first time. My family all left New Haven proper, so I hadn't been there in years. I went back for the first time like 6 months ago, and I was like, this is amazing. What? This is nice. I like here. I hadn't been back in so long, and it made me feel really silly. The advice I would give to people in New Haven is to really squeeze all the resources out of New Haven. I say now, I didn't fully appreciate growing up in New Haven and like going, getting to go to a place like Hill House and then like taking the city bus downtown to go to ECA. And then through Hill House, I took classes at Southern. I took classes at Yale when I was in high school, and just like, I was just doing a bunch of stuff all the time. And I think that, New Haven can be a city that you feel, you can sort of like feel the presence of other larger close cities like Providence or Boston or New York. But like New Haven in and of itself has so much to do. And I regret spending so much time like trying to get out of New Haven as opposed to just enjoying it for what it is. And it's great.
So what's next for Jazmine Hughes? You won the big award. You're keeping people informed about your friend Gersh. We're all going to think about him. And we're very proud of you. Even those of us who never met you, for the New Haven young woman who's doing such a great job and being honored and deservedly so. So what's next for Jazmine Hughes?
What's next for me is that I have quite a different story that's coming out in about 6 weeks. For the past year, I've been reporting on the mass shooting that happened in Buffalo, New York.
Oh yeah, the supermarket. Yeah.
White supremacists went to the supermarket and killed all these older Black people. So the 1-year anniversary of that is coming up pretty soon. So my story on that will be out around then.
I'll be reading it on Saturday because I come back from shul on Saturday, and then the weekly portion is the Times. My wife and I divide the sections, and I'll definitely be reading that one before John Hodgman. He'll be the dessert. Jazmine Hughes, thanks so much for joining us on Dateline New Haven, making time. Congratulations again on your award and your career success.
Thank you so much. Again, this is just as good as the award. I'm so honored to be here today.
And thanks to Harry Droz behind the controls. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It'd Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.